It's go time.
The boys are back. That's right, Florida Man Sports is here with another exciting episode. So just sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride. This is Florida Man Sports.
Ladies and gents, damas y caballeros, Florida Man Sports is back.
Look at this. We're going international.
We're going international now. Now listen, folks, here at Florida Man Sports, always want to tell you that we are streaming on all major platforms. But if you don't hear it in my voice, I'm super excited, Johnny Cinco, because here we've made a decision.
Okay.
We made an executive decision. We're changing the format a little bit because you asked for it, so we're delivering. This is now Florida Man Sports, all based Florida football sports. That's collegiate, NFL. You want it, you got it. What are your thoughts on that, Johnny, before we get rolling?
Well, I think it's what the audience wanted. Listen, I love baseball, love basketball,
Yes,
Florida.
yes.
But for the most part, we're going to focus on our Florida football teams. That's both professional and collegiate, just like you mentioned. So look forward to hearing everything about your Jacksonville Jaguars, Tampa Bay Bucs, and Miami Dolphins, as well as University of Central Florida, FSU, University of Miami, and University of Florida.
Absolutely. And so we're going to kick this one off, Johnny Cinco. Here we're talking about the NFL first because the NFL just announced that there is $22 million that they found. Between $22 million and $26 million. The cap is going up.
Nice.
And so now we got to talk about how that impacts our NFL teams here in Florida. And let's kick it off with Jacksonville. We're going to play a little game.
Okay.
I like to play games here at Florida Man Sports. It's the game here is called Cut, Resign, Free Agent. So for each team with this new cap space, what are they going to do? Let's kick it off with Jacksonville.
Okay.
Who do they need to cut? And by the way, cut, you could cut / trade, right? Because same difference. But who are you going to cut in the Jacksonville Jaguars?
I think it's clear that Jacksonville needs to go ahead and let go of Kirk. Trevor Lawrence needs some weapons. They tried to give him a weapon with Gabe Davis. Listen, I'll say cut Gabe Davis. The problem is that's a $20 million cap hit with Gabe Davis, so it's not going to happen. With Kirk, they could save $10 million to go ahead and release him. They still take a bit of a cap hit, but not obviously nearly as much as they're getting with Gabe Davis. It was a mistake. Now they need to give him some type of weapons. We'll get to that later on, but right here, it just makes sense. The guy has been season-ending injuries the last 2 years. It just doesn't make any more sense. Kirk can be a good quality receiver. It just hasn't worked out for Jacksonville. With a new coach in place, I'm expecting him to kind of do something. The GM, they just hired a GM yesterday. So now it's time to give Trevor Lawrence a proper weapon.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you as far as him being a cap casualty, so he definitely needs to be cut. Him and Engram are just out of control as far as what they're due this year for their production. For me, Johnny, I went with Etienne. I went with a little bit stronger pick, and here's why. From a cap perspective, it's really a wash to cut him. So if you're looking at the financials, you're like, why would you cut him? Well, you've got Tank Bigsby. He's going to be the starter next year. You've got Etienne, who is not going to get his fifth-year option. And so there is talent there because he's young. So if I'm Jacksonville, I'm either going to cut him or trade him for a third, fourth-round pick, get yourself a serviceable running back to match with Tank Bigsby. And so anyways, he's not a RB1. And he's not the dynamic duo that the Lions have or that the Bucs have with White and with Bucky Irving. So for me, it's Etienne. It's a drastic change, but you got a new coach, you got a new GM. Make the move, make Bigsby your number one option, and get a third or fourth rounder for the draft for Etienne because he's still got some value there.
I personally think the Jaguars have way too many needs in the defensive end to go ahead and cut Etienne. I mean, Engram. Well, it's Etienne, yeah. It doesn't really matter in terms of cutting him doesn't make sense because of what you mentioned. There's no money really.
No, it's more like a cut. It's like a trade, right?
So
you're going to get a fourth. You're going to get a fourth rounder.
A trade
for this guy.
makes sense. The guy still has talent.
Yeah.
Obviously, coming out of college, they're expecting bigger things from him. But him, in this league, unless you have a Barkley, you need a 2 or 3 backs in the backfield.
Absolutely.
There. So
absolutely.
So still,
and that's my point, Johnny. That it's not working out in Jacksonville. They're not a dynamic duo. Is my point.
So I think you're right. I think trading him, if you can get a third, fourth rounder, go ahead and do it. Run it the ball behind Tank Bigsby. But we'll see. We'll see what Jacksonville. You have to make some moves, bro.
Right.
You have to because it's been abysmal the last few years.
Speaking of making moves, right, that was who they need to either cut or trade. Let's talk about re-signing because you mentioned the defense. That's a really good point there. Who do they have to re-sign with this new coach, this new GM?
I think Andre Kisco. Mm-hmm. Yes, no, Kisco, not Crisco. Kisco.
Andre Cisco.
I think a 3-year, $30 million deal is about right for him. He is one of the most underrated safeties in the league. You know, they need to get better defensively. They need to stay young, and they are. They have other pieces they need to do, but they can't lose him. He's been solid for them. He played well in 2024, despite having, didn't really have a whole lot to deal with. But he pairs well with Darnell Savage. So those two guys they want to keep there in the back out there to kind of – they need to build their secondary around those guys. But Crisco,
Andre Cisco, yeah.
So thong song, okay.
Yeah.
You can just sing the thong song, and I know you're talking about.
That's his name. That's his name. And listen, I love the pick because here at Florida Man Sports, we don't share who we have as far as names, and that is literally the person that I have at the top of my list, Andre Cisco, the safety in Jacksonville. And for me, the reasons why you got to re-sign him is he's 25 years old, man. This kid was supposed to have a breakout year this season. Then he gets benched week 13, week 14. And you know what, folks? When somebody plays bad, you mentioned the Jaguars receiver that they signed last year, Gabe Davis,
yes.
And you said how they should cut him possibly. It's not all Gabe Davis's fault. You got a team that only won 4 games. So going back to Andre Cisco, it's not necessarily everything his fault that he had a bad season, that they only won 4 games. So to your point, he is like number 8, number 9 as far as the top safeties that are available. So please re-sign him. Give him an opportunity with this new coach, with this new defensive scheme, and see what he can do. Because I'm telling you, man, there's like, what is it called? Skill and will.
Yes.
And the guy's an NFL player. You see him play. It's a skill thing, and hopefully the defense here can change for the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah, I think 3 years, $30 million is a good contract
like
for him there. $10 million a year. He gets well paid. He deserves it.
Well, let's put a bow on the Jacksonville Jaguars. We got an idea of who they should cut or trade. We got an idea of who they got to re-sign. Let's talk about free agency. Who are they bringing to the table?
I think I alluded to it earlier. We need weapons on the corners for Trevor Lawrence. I think they need to make a move for T. Higgins. It makes sense. He's not re-signing with Cincinnati. They can franchise him, whatever they're going to. He's not staying with Cincinnati. They're going to move on from him. Cincinnati can't afford to keep him and keep all the players they need to re-sign. So especially, Chase. But I think they really need to make that move. You got to remember, guys, just 2 years ago, the Jacksonville Jaguars at one point in the season were the number 1 seed and then fell off the cliff in one of the biggest collapses in NFL history. They've been on the cusp. On paper, they've been good. They just has poor management, poor coaching. So now with new management, new coaching, maybe it's going to be a change. You guys can do something this season. Every season you have the talent. You spent all the money on Trevor Lawrence. You need to give him the weapons to do so, to actually see, okay, you're stuck with him. It doesn't matter. The cap hit for next year for Trevor Lawrence is like $17 million. But 3 years later, it's like $74 million. Insane. So you've invested the money in this guy. You have to give him the weapons. T. Higgins is available or will be available. You have the draft capital. Just go ahead and make the move. So you're actually giving your number 1 quarterback with all the money proven weapons. You saw what happened with Daniel Jones. Didn't really have any weapons. Yes, they drafted a guy who was pretty good, but still, no, not a rookie.
No, they drafted and they took away their running back.
Yeah, they took away the best running back. They had the best running back
terrible
season of all time.
Right.
But you took away his weapons. Go ahead and give the Jacksonville Jaguars T. Higgins, and we'll see really what Trevor Lawrence can do.
It's very rare here that this guy and I go back to back, so I'm going to have to cheers to that. That's, it's very rare. Florida Man Sports streaming on all major platforms, and the consensus is clear. I've got Johnny T. Higgins as the person that they need to go ahead and get from free agency, and for very similar reasons to what you said. But I do want to double down on something. Okay. The owner comes out and says we're turning the page. The owner talks about bringing in the head coach and overpaying for him. The GM, the president of operations, everything has been changed. This is what I alluded to in previous episodes, where you put your money where your mouth is. And so you're absolutely right. Think about this for 1 second. They did a really good job of drafting Brian Thomas Jr. So now you've got Brian Thomas Jr. on the left. You've got T. Higgins on the right, 6'4", 26-year-old guy. And then you've got Gabe Davis where he's best at in the middle. And that, with a new offensive scheme, I think gives the Jaguars an opportunity that if you're really saying that Trevor Lawrence is the future, that's putting your money where your mouth is, in my opinion. So I agree with you completely that they need to get Higgins on there.
I think it doesn't really matter what we think if Trevor Lawrence is the future. You're stuck with him. You're stuck with him. we've alluded in the past to whether, especially me, I've lost confidence in Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what we think. It doesn't matter what anybody thinks. Trevor Lawrence is our guy in Jacksonville.
But that's what I mean, though, as far as ownership saying that is
Yeah.
true. Because one thing to say it, and look what happened with Daniel Jones. You made a really good point.
Yes.
So you can say it, Jacksonville Jaguars. You need to show it, is my point. Like, you got to show it. You're right. He is the quarterback, but you got to show it, but dollars and cents.
Amen to that.
Let's move on to the Miami Dolphins, Florida Man Sports here. Again, we're playing this game. We're either cutting, trading you, re-signing, and free agent. Who are we cutting out of Miami, Johnny?
I guarantee you don't have the same guy I got here, but it's because it's rare. You don't even notice this position unless they're horrendous. And Jake Bailey was horrendous, the punter for the Miami Dolphins. Listen, you're saving only like $2.5 million, it's 2.52 to be exact, this upcoming year. But he was so bad, and you don't realize it, how important playing the position game, figuring things out, how important it is. There's a lot of players that Miami needs to move on from, needs to go and replace, needs to sign. We can have a whole show designated just to the Miami Dolphins and the things they need to do. But we're focusing on one player. And for me, I saw enough Miami Dolphin football last year to see how bad this punter really is. And that position game matters. So there's a lot of things that needs to happen in terms of re-signing and the draft. But in terms of cutting somebody, just go ahead and cut. Even if you draft somebody, pick somebody up, they can't be worse than Jake Bailey.
No, I definitely didn't pick that, and I could definitely see that based on the season that he had. For me, I was trying to be funny as far as cutting, and I was going to say the whole offensive line because they allowed over 40-something sacks this season. Tua alone with 21 sacks. And here's how the offensive line breaks down real quick. Eichenberg is gone. Robert Jones is gone. They're all free agents. But you got Austin Jackson, and that's for me who we need to cut. If we don't cut him, trade him. The guy had high expectations last year. He busted his knee again and got hurt. I understand he was a first-round pick back in 2020, but folks, the offensive line cannot continue to do this to Tua, cannot continue to do this to the Dolphins. You need to genuinely address it, and it would be a statement move to either cut or trade this guy. The worst part about it, the worst part about it is this: you don't have an identity. There's no one name an offensive tackle guard for the Dolphins in the last 5-6 years that is relevant that besides. Can you?
No.
And that's why. And so for me, if you're serious about Tua, you're serious about the future. I know that you're strapped for cap, but this is the time that you either grab this young guy he is younger. I think he's 25, 26 years old. Go ahead and get that third or fourth round pick, but move on because that offensive line is dangerous.
Yeah, agreed.
Let's talk about re-signing, Johnny Cinco. Who are we re-signing for the Miami Dolphins?
Well, looking at it, there's a few teams. The Miami Dolphins, for whatever reason, have so many players on one-year deals. They'll sign them 1 year and figure it out. So there's a plethora of players they can do that with. But looking at it, I like the idea of having the three running back backfield there. Mostert's gone. They already let him go. He's not coming back. Older back quality. He did really well for the Dolphins. Nobody expected this old back to still perform, and he did. But his time was up. I think it's time to go ahead and re-sign Wilson. Obviously, a chain and Jalen Wright are the backfield for Miami, but Wilson is a quality back. You can get him on the cheap. He knows the offense. Every year we've had at least one running back for the Dolphins, if not two, go down somewhere in the season. And if you're serious about Tua, we're obviously going to talk a little bit more about the offensive line and different things that needs to happen. But a quarterback needs not just a good offensive line. If you learn anything from the Super Bowl, they need a running game. They need a solid running game. So if a chain goes down, Jalen Wright goes down, you know that Wilson's still there. It's a good mix up there. Still, Chain's the number one guy. But it's not going to be expensive. Miami doesn't have a lot of money. Even though NFL,
they don't.
NFL found them some money to help them with there. They can easily re-sign Wilson. Unless some team wants to overpay, which I don't see it happening, Wilson is not going to cost much of anything, and it's going to solidify that backfield.
Thinking about a 1-year deal? 2-year deal?
I mean, Miami's the king of 1-year deals,
right.
But ideally, if you can go and give them a 2, you can always do a guaranteed 1 year and kind of give them the team options for something else based on performance. But it's Wilson's the guy. Just go ahead and re-sign him on the cheap and solidify that backfield.
I think you nailed it on the head. When you look at the financial situation, even with the extra money, they still got to do some cuts. They got to restructure a lot of contracts because there's not much they can cut.
Yeah.
And so it really sucks because what I really want to say, who they should be re-signing, I know you know this already, is Devin Holland, but they're not going to because they can't afford him, right?
I was looking at that. It's just like money. I was trying to do the logical options.
Yeah.
Where it's like,
no, you're right.
You got
you're
no
right.
money.
Which is why I had to go with linebacker Tyrell Dotson, exactly for the exact same reasons that you said. He's somebody that the Dolphins can re-sign and they should re-sign him. They got him last year as far as the trade deadlines. He actually was cut by Seattle. Then we picked him up. He ended up having 3 interceptions, so he was more than serviceable. When you're struggling for money, when you're struggling for talent, they're losing 4 linebackers. The Miami Dolphins are through free agency. So this is one that you need to shore up. He's 27 years old, so he's entering his prime. He's going to be cheap, like you said, Johnny.
Yep.
So please look out for linebacker Tyrell Dotson in Miami, and let's re-sign him because Lord knows they got a lot of holes to fill. Let's move on to free agency. It's going to be slim pickings like we talked about, but who do you got as far as the free agent list?
Well, we mentioned it more than a few times that the Dolphins don't have a lot of cap space. Right. They do, however, have a lot of draft capital. They have the 7 picks, and they actually have 3 compensatory picks, so they have some things to move around with there. But we all know if they're going to go out and look in the market, they got to do something with the O-line. They got to figure something out there. And I think for me, the best fit for them is Mekhi Becton, if I believe is the guard for the Eagles. We saw exactly what he did. He's 27 years old. He was a bust in tackle for years with the Jets, but then the Eagles went ahead and moved him over to guard, and this guy was amazing. He was a big reason why the Eagles won the Super Bowl. He's 6'7", 363 pounds. The guy is a monster. He's still young in his prime. You have to go ahead and make some moves. So go ahead and figure something out, but he will be available. So whether you're going to go ahead and do a sign and trade to figure something out, I don't know, but he is available. You have to make some moves to protect. If you're serious about protecting Tua, then you have to go and make moves for players like this.
So that's so funny. Florida Man Sports, streaming on all major platforms. Please do like, share, and subscribe. I actually had the same person, but I switched it at the end for 2 reasons. One, I couldn't pronounce his name, but two, I don't see him as a realistic person for the Dolphins financials. Like they're so tight that I don't think that they're going to swing that contract. So for me, I did go with the guard, Johnny. I went with Kevin Zettler from the Detroit Lions. You're talking about a guy who is the number one option. When you want somebody to be a leader for that offensive line, when you want somebody that's going to turn that page for that offensive line and build continuity, he's 34 years old. He's already past his prime, but last year he didn't allow any sacks. He played every single game. He's the beacon of consistency. And so I imagine that they're going to draft people. Go ahead.
No. It's just funny because I had that guy.
Oh, okay.
I had that guy, but I didn't pick him. Why? Because he's 34 years old.
Well, yeah, and so my thought process is this. He's going to be more of a player/coach type of position where I mentioned earlier that they got to revamp that offensive line, right? Well, why not with the 34-year-old who didn't allow any sacks and played all the games and draft some tackles, some guards in this draft and build around him? Because, again, 21 sacks to Tua alone last year, to a guy that's only played 1 full season in his entire career. So for me, it's Kevin Zettler from the Detroit Lions. But it's funny, we both had guards.
Well, they can afford him.
Yeah.
They're going to get him.
Yeah.
The thing is that, guys, the window right now, you can say whatever you want about the Dolphins. The Dolphins, yes, they fell off last year. Why did they fall off? Because Tua was out all year. Yeah. So, and it wasn't really the O-line's fault in that. Tua was just running like an idiot. But at the end of the day, you still have Hill for now, which I've already spoke about previously in other podcasts. It's time to move on from Hill, trade his ass, and go ahead and figure something else out. But if you still have Hill, you have Waddle, you have Tua, guys, you have a window to win. You have to figure things out. You have to go ahead and put the pieces up there that's going to go ahead and put you over the top. So that's why, like my pick was like, put you over the top. Ideally, they can sign them both. They can go ahead and
I don't know if they got the money for the Eagles. I think he's going to demand a little bit more than they want to pay, but maybe they can.
I think that obviously restructuring will be involved.
Oh, yeah.
So Hill, and another thing, if they're going to keep him, they're going to have to restructure that contract, maybe restructure a couple things with Tua. Whatever they need to do, even with Waddle, restructure to go ahead and get these pieces in there. So the window's there, Miami, and there's no point, I feel, in terms of drafting those guys to protect the franchise. The franchise, which is Tua, goes down, your season's over. That's good, really, for any quarterback. Any quarterback in the league, we saw what happens. Your quarterback goes down. Unless you're the Philadelphia Eagles from years ago with Nick Foley, it's your season's over. That doesn't happen. Somebody sold their soul to the devil for that victory in Philadelphia. But it's not going to happen again. Okay, it's not going to happen again.
Oh,
so
Lord.
We'll see. But obviously, we both agree. O-line.
Oh yeah, 100%. Florida Band Sports moving down to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where we're playing one of our favorite games here at Florida Band Sports. Cut, re-sign, free agent.
Before you get to all that, there, like, no, you're right.
Re-sign.
No, you're good. You're good.
Okay, well, playing that favorite game here, cut, re-sign, free agent. We got to move to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where you're gonna go first on here because I'm gonna tell you something. You know how hard it was for me to pick a Buccaneer to cut?
It wasn't that difficult.
Do you want to know
for me.
how hard it was for me?
I know.
It took me a minute. Who do you got?
Well, I mean, if you paid attention to our fantasy show and a couple of things, and a player that I wasn't that high on, and it doesn't really make sense for them to keep him around, for me, is Rachaad White. It just doesn't make sense for Tampa Bay to keep White. Okay, White, his dual threat ability is gone. He rushed 613 yards, 393 yards receiving, both down significantly from the year before. The emergence of Bucky Irvin. Obviously, you got Tucker there. You got Bucky Irvin, Tucker. You're there. Why are you going to? Those guys are the significantly cheaper options you have there. If you want that third back, which I love, you can draft him. It doesn't matter. It doesn't. I'm not saying that he did a terrible job. The thing is that you have to make tough choices, Tampa, this year. This year to go ahead and really put you over the top, you got to make cuts. You can't cut like the premier guys. Vita Vea, Jamel Dean, Jordan Whitehead. Those guys could also free up some free agent, some cap and do some things, but they're too important to the team. So I'm sorry. I'm not saying that White is trash. But what I'm saying is that it's just you have to make tough choices. So that's a place they can cut and not really lose, be diminished that much in that position. So I'm sorry. I know he's your boy, but White, it's time. We thank you for your service, but it's time for us to move on from him. We have other options. We still need to pick up. Dude, we saw what we did. The rushing defense was horrendous. They got to make some moves there.
You always find a way. You always find a way to ruin the show for me, to ruin it for me.
So you disagree with that?
Let me 100% because look. At the end of the day, the expression goes as always: if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Right. So in other words, you've got Bucky Irving who took over the reins, and White was okay. There wasn't any drama playing the second fiddle.
Okay.
But the dynamic duo works. You just alluded to how Miami is good to have 3 running backs.
Yeah.
Okay. So it costs you. There's a difference. When I said, hold on real quick. When I said Etienne to be traded, right, or cut, the reality is this. In my humble opinion, White is the better option and works well and gels well with the Bucs. However, if you go trade for trade, Etienne will get you more in the market because people buying the name, buying the person, the pick, right? You'll get more from a draft perspective, which is why I said for them to trade him if you're Jacksonville. White can't be traded like that because they don't see him the way that I see him. In the system that we have him in, it works. And it's not going to cost you any. You don't need to re-sign him. You're just playing him on his final year. So that's why I disagree. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. The 3-headed monster works. He gets his passing touchdowns, and it doesn't cost you any. You're not going to get that 3rd or 4th rounder for him. You're better off keeping him.
You still need to find ways to just trim money off the cap. 613 yards rushing and 393 yards receiving isn't enough to go ahead and keep him.
And 9 touchdowns.
You're not going to.
And 9
when
touchdowns.
The other 2 options are costing you half of what
touchdowns.
he is there. So at the end of the day, Chris knows I'm right.
No,
but
nope.
that's his fanhood talking.
Nope,
His
nope.
fanhood is like, no.
I'm going to show you. I'm going to
It's
show you how
time to
this is
move
not
on.
fanhood talking. I spent hours crying myself to sleep last night because it really was genuinely tough because I am a diehard Bucs fan. And one thing that I couldn't, like every time I tried to turn the page, I couldn't get over is the fact that if you look at last season, we're like the 18th team in overall defense. And the reason why we're 18th in overall defense is not because of the running game. We stop them like nobody. It's because of the passing game. This guy can go out there and throw 4 touchdowns on us. It was that bad. And so when you look at that, you look at, okay, who's getting to the quarterback? So you look at Kansas. Kansas had 17 quarterback pressures, and he had 7.5 sacks. He had a really good year this year. 24-year-old Logan Hall. If you're listening, I'm sorry. I apologize. I picked you. You're on the other side of Kansas. You had 5.5 sacks. That is definitely serviceable. We could probably trade you. We could probably get some assets for you. But at the end of the day, we need somebody who can pressure the quarterback when it comes to the passing game. So we got Kansas on the left. We need somebody on the right. Hurts my heart, but Logan Hall, I'm looking at you. I'm sorry. 5.5 sacks is not enough. Being the 18th middle of the pack defense is not enough, and that's what we need to address. So if I'm the GM, sorry, please forgive me, Lord, I'm cutting you. Sorry, it took a lot on me. It's very hard to say that about a 24-year-old kid. So
Yeah, that's the thing. He's 24. He still has some time to kind of figure things out. You know, it's
At the Bucs' expense?
yeah.
At our
it's,
no.
it's not. But White has had his opportunities to go ahead, and he had a decent year the year before, where he had, you know, like over 1,000 yards combined. But a complete drop off this year. And I'm sorry, Bucky Irvin.
I'm alluding to the fact that Myles Garrett is out there. And if we
I
get rid of
I
him,
get
yeah.
I get what you're talking. I get what you're talking about.
Browns in a trade.
Yeah, we're going to talk, and we'll get to that. But still, like, I'm sorry, the production doesn't warrant keeping White on the field for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers anyway.
Enough of the emotions here, Florida Man Sports. We have to make the tough decisions. We got him out of there, cut him, trade him. Talk about re-signing. Who are we bringing back?
Well, you got to protect Baker. Luke Gadecki is the guy. He's the right tackle here for us here. He's the guy to go ahead and keep. His production's been outstanding. He's been a workhorse, young guy. It's that is for me the number one priority for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to re-sign that man.
For me, it's Anthony Nelson. He's the edge / linebacker for the Bucs. He's one of the longest tenured Bucs. At 28 years old, he's already signed 2 major contracts with the Bucs. We are losing 5 linebackers this year. 5.
Yeah.
And so
Maybe.
No. Well, 5 because Levante David. I'm assuming he's coming back. So that's after Levante David.
That's
after Levante David.
Interesting assumption.
Right, exactly. Well, and that's my point, right? We need continuity there. And you talking about a guy who has always been consistent. You're talking about a guy who said, "Hey, don't play linebacker, play the edge," and he does it just fine. And so for me, he's 27 years young in his prime. I can't believe this would be the 3rd contract, but I know Jason Light knows this. Do not let Anthony Nelson go. I know you have to address so many other positions that we're going to talk about here in Florida Man Sports. But at the end of the day, the linebacker position, it's crazy to think about this. If Levante David does retire, Anthony Nelson will be the longest tenured Buck on that side of the ball. That's pretty crazy. So re-sign Anthony Nelson.
Okay.
Let's talk about free agency. Somebody that we can bring in. The Bucs know how to make the cap space happen. Jason Light's the GOAT. Who are they bringing in?
I have an idea of who you're going to say, but we're thinking similar. At the end of the day, what does the Tampa Bay Buccaneers need more than anything is they need an edge rusher.
They do.
They need. Listen, guys, you got to score points on defense. You got to force turnovers. You got to figure something out. And while there's a premier name out there, there's another premier name that will be available as well. Not yet, but will be. Now, due to the reports I've been reading, is that the Chargers, due to the mess they have over there financially, they got rid of all their receivers last year, and now another cap casualty looks like it's going to be. They're going to cut, if not trade, Joey Bosa. Come on, you can actually pick up Bosa, pick up that contract, which will be less than the premier talent that's available out there, and the dude is a premier talent. So I think Joey Bosa is a much better fit for Tampa. It's something that's going to save you over the premier talents that are available that my counterpart's probably going to allude to. But I think Joey Bosa will be an amazing pickup, and that is the type of player.
If he's cut, like as a free agent, if he's cut.
It's been widely reported that they're going to, because they can't. It's too much.
I got you.
So I'm saying that it's going to happen. So they don't want to come. Obviously, they want to trade him because they want to get something for this talent. But it's just not fitting for the Chargers at the moment. So I think with Tampa, that's the piece they need. Right there. Some guy like that is to get them over the hump. You got to have playmakers. You got to have players that are going to make a difference. This is one of those guys. There's other guys as well, but I think this guy may actually be affordable for Tampa.
I as a Buck fan, if you were telling me to get Bosa, I have no qualms and no complaints. That's all. I would love to see that. For me, going back to what I was saying earlier, as far as the linebackers, when I was actually analyzing this here, Johnny, it really became like a whole for us here at the Bucs. We got, besides Levante David, you've got other linebackers that are like 34, 33 years old. So the first person that popped up to me when I did my research was Jamie Sherwood. He is the Jets linebacker. Here's a guy that, however you hear the expression of somebody like they're playing on a contract year, so they ball out.
Yes.
Well, he did. He balled out. As an example, he had 46 tackles 2 years ago. Last year, he had 158 tackles. The guy just showed up. And so you got to be real careful. You got to be real cautious because sometimes people just play for the contract. But here's the way that I see it, Johnny. Alluding to what I said earlier as far as bringing back Levante David and all that, you need somebody to pass the torch to. And here's a 25-year-old kid, 25 years old, who hasn't entered his prime yet, that if he could give this type of production, we know what he can do, and Levante David does come back, right? Now you have the linebackers that you need to run it back and try to be consistent and make the playoffs. So for me, that's my thought process with Jamin Sherwood. If the Bucs can bring back Levante David, you kind of solidify that, and then to your point, worry about the edge and worry about the other things that you got to worry about. So Jamin Sherwood,
that's your guy.
Yeah, you're at the top of my list as free agent.
He's a Jet, you know that, right?
I do.
Okay.
Which actually I think that's a positive because here's the way that I see it. Here's the way that I see it. You were 15 tackles, 16 tackles, 46 tackles, and then 158, right, with the Jets.
Okay.
Imagine what he could do with the Bucs.
I want to remind you though.
That's all I'm saying.
That he plays for the Jets. I want to remind you.
No, but I know.
That's your guy?
I know.
You've been gaslighting me all week about Myles Garrett. Well, so that's your guy?
Because for me, that's a free agent. That's a trade for Myles Garrett, right? It's more than likely a trade.
It's a signing. Free agent signing.
In free agency, think about this for a second. If I'm right.
So is Bosa.
I'll leave it at this, right? Levante David has to come back. We re-sign Anthony Nelson, which I alluded to earlier, right? And then we bring in Jamie Sherwood. For me, if you're Jason Light, which again, he's the GOAT when it comes to this stuff, you're thinking about now and you're thinking about the future. And when you're thinking about those two things, you pay money to Jamie Sherwood, and let's see if he can be consistent. That's all I'm saying.
I know. But I think what it came down to is you finally agree with me that Myles Garrett is too expensive for the Bucs right now. He'll have to take a pay cut.
See, Johnny, that's the we can I guess agree kind of in a way because to your point, there could be draft picks that could be involved, right? Browns could eat some negative cap if they wanted to, right? So there's a negotiation that if the Bucs are going to do it, I hope they address it during the draft.
Well, the Bucs are going to have to go and give up some draft capital if they're going to pick up somebody like Bosa or pick up Myles Garrett.
Right, and that's what I mean.
But draft capital and they need to pay. I mean, unless because the Chargers seriously are considering cutting Bosa, just because teams know unless somebody really wants him, and I think they should make the move. Tampa, just go ahead and give up the draft capital, pay the man, and get Bosa. If you don't, then if everybody's playing hardball, then obviously you're going to have to go ahead and cut Bosa, and then you're competing with everybody else. Just go ahead and give them the draft capital. You have a team that can win, Tampa.
If you're a Florida team, though, that's kind of good news in a way because if Bosa is available, whatever degree that is, then that means that I would imagine that Myles Garrett's value kind of levels off a little bit. Maybe that helps us out in the long run.
I don't know if it levels out, but I am excited because honestly, right now, Florida sports looks good. I mean, Tampa has been competing every single year, and they just need that key player to get them over the hump. Jacksonville, even though you had the complete fall off the cliff moment, several of them, at the end of the day, my God, your roster looks good. A couple key pieces there, you can do it. Same thing with Miami. Florida teams all have the potential to get to the Super Bowl. They really do. It sounds ridiculous. I mean, thinking of a Jacksonville or Miami, Tampa's been there not that long ago, but every team in Florida has the potential to win a championship. You got to go ahead and get some cojones and make the moves.
Make the moves, yeah.
And just go ahead and do it.
100%. That's actually a perfect segue to our next topic because I'm going to allude to a little bit to that, Johnny. So I love that you brought that up. But talking about loving to play games here, Florida Man Sports streaming on all major platforms. We're going to play one last game with our Florida NFL teams here, Johnny. It's one question, one answer, just one for each team that I got here. This came from the fans. This didn't come from this guy. It came from X. The first question is with the Jacksonville Jaguars. They've got the new coach. They've got the new president. They've got the new GM, all that good stuff. Question is, what is considered success for the Jaguars in 2025? How would you define success for the Jaguars in 2025?
Man,
Great question, by the way.
That's a loaded question because if you're talking about Tampa or Miami, then the answer for me and those teams will be like, well, get to a conference championship. Get to a conference championship, that's what you need to do. Get there, compete, possibly win it, but just get there.
Consider the season, I agree.
But even Jacksonville, who was in the playoffs a few years ago, won a playoff game, should have been the playoffs 2 years ago and collapsed, and then last year abysmal. But honestly, it's more than just 1 year, 2025. Jacksonville needs to make the playoffs this upcoming year, but that's not enough. You won a playoff game 3 years ago. So you need to get Jacksonville needs to have consecutive runs in the playoffs. That's success for me. Consecutive runs. You can't just go ahead and be like a one-trick pony and just show up 1 year, hey, I made the playoffs, and then disappear for 3 years. Okay, you need to make the playoffs this year. Whatever run that is, if you're out in the first round, whatever, but the next year you need to. So I know you're asking me about the 2025 season.
And I was gonna ask you, you're not wrong in what you're saying, but again, I want to, because there's just one question, one answer. So this is for 2025. What do you consider success for the Jaguars in 2025? You're not wrong in anything you've said, but what do you say about it?
Jacksonville, you need to. No, you can't get. You have to win a playoff game. You get here when you've already done it.
Wow.
I understand that. What did you always used to say, Chris? Like, oh, but like I feel bad saying this, but to like solidify or even like understand like losership in the NFL. Like, well, you're the Jacksonville Jaguars. What are you expecting? You're the Jaguars. You're the Jaguars. You got to get out of that mentality. You got to go ahead and be like, you right now, Jacksonville, you have a really good football team. And it's time to show up. Your coaches have let you down. Your management has let you down. It's time for things to go ahead and piece everything together, grow some cojones, go ahead and make some moves this year, and actually go ahead and put you have a winning team right there on paper. You really do. Just comes down to getting the playoffs. Getting the playoffs ain't enough. Win a damn playoff game. Obviously, I want you to have multiple season success. This year, win a playoff game to give your fans hope that you're not just a team that's going to get there. Have a Washington Commanders type run. You guys have it in you. We saw it. You guys were actually the number 1 seed 2 years ago. For a portion of the season, you were. And then you just fell off. You 99% chance to make the playoffs. You're there. It's essentially the key pieces are still on that roster. You just need to go ahead and make that move. I've talked about what you needed to do on the edges there for Trevor Lawrence. But Jacksonville, you need to not only get to the playoffs. I think most people are like, I'm happy with getting to the playoffs. No, don't have that mentality. Win a damn playoff game.
It's a lot of wishful thinking, and I understand where you're coming from because, and you alluded to this already, that not last year but the year before that, back to back, they won 9 games. And when you look at it now, you're almost like, man, maybe we're a little hard on Peterson. I don't know, because they won back-to-back 9 games. It was just ugly the way that they lost right at the end. But no, I disagree with you wholeheartedly on this for the Jacksonville Jaguars. This is Florida Man Sports. And for me, Johnny, a successful 2025 is rooted on 8 games. Win 8 games. This season, first year for this coach that I'm not so hot about for obvious reasons. First year for the GM, first year for the president, right? Exactly. Win 8 games. That would do 2 things. 1, it would double your win count from last season, which would be great. Who doesn't want that, Jacksonville? Who doesn't want that? And 2, it shows that Trevor Lawrence is the future going forward, not just the financial future that you alluded to earlier, because we know that financially he is the future. But I mean, genuinely speaking, you're excited about Trevor Lawrence, right? Does that make sense?
Okay.
So for me, 8 wins. Get the 8 wins. Get people excited. Get all Florida sports takers all excited that Duval is back in action. 8 wins.
The thing is that you get away with that mentality when
You have to, bro.
No. You're listen. I'm probably most of the Jacksonville fans are like, okay, because they unfortunately haven't had a winning franchise. But no, I rebuke that type of thinking. No, because I don't accept it. Jacksonville, if you had a rookie quarterback contract, then okay, yeah, go. No, I don't care as a new coach. This was a Tampa Bay trader that went ahead. Okay, he's going to go ahead and go to Jacksonville. Fine. Okay,
Tell it like it is.
Go ahead. But at the end of the day, you paid this man,
right,
and you don't pay a quarterback. You think that what Burrow got his contract, even though Cincinnati fell off, that Cincinnati's okay with the type of year they just had, who just missed the playoff? That team could have caused some damage in the playoffs, but they just couldn't come through. Defense was a mess. They paid Burrow. You're there to go ahead and get in the playoffs and win playoff games and compete for a championship.
Right.
Now, Trevor Lawrence, they paid you to figure it out. Okay? I don't care if you don't have all the weapons. Jacksonville needs to give you an additional weapon, but figure it out. So at the end of the day, you can say what you want. You got to get in the damn playoffs. You have the team. You need some pieces there. We have time to go ahead and do that. Free agency starts in less than a month.
Right.
So figure it out, Jacksonville. Figure it out. I don't want to hear this 8 games of success. 8 games for Jacksonville Jaguar fans should not be acceptable.
But it will, because we'll be excited. And don't tell me I'm wrong. We'll be. Listen, if the Jags, this is now as we're changing our platform here. This is all Florida Man football, Florida Man sports, and so I'll be very stoked if the Jaguars pull through with 8 Ws to start the tenure of this wannabe head coach that
Nope.
We'll get there. So, at any rate, Florida Man Sports here. We are asking just one question, one answer, Johnny Cinco. Moving on to the Miami Dolphins, where, and let's call it what it is. This is Florida Man Sports, so we know what the Florida teams are thinking about. And in Miami, Johnny, let's be real. The question is,
Okay.
who's got the hotter seat? The coach or the quarterback? Talking about McDaniels and Tua. We know the history. So, who's in the hotter seat this season?
Well, between Daniels and Tua, I'm sorry, they're tied together. It's pretty simple, guys. If Tua falls off and they have the same type of year, it doesn't matter. He gets injured 3-4 games in, it doesn't matter. They fall off there. Daniels is done. If Tua's still there, they have a great season. They're tied together. It's going to happen here. So no matter what happens, a new coach coming in is not going to be loyal to Tua. You saw the coach before with Tua. Wasn't a big fan of it. Flores was not a fan of Tua. Tua was almost going to quit football. Flores tried to trade Tua. They tried to do everything he can to get rid of him. So, Daniels had that confidence in Tua, kind of got the best out of him. They are tied together pretty much as Brady and Belichick were. Now, obviously, Brady took 20 years later.
It's a terrible comparison, but
No,
I get where you're going.
no.
I get what you mean by that.
What I'm saying is that
Yeah.
early
That's
on,
a terrible comparison.
it's
I get what you mean by it. Though.
what I mean is that Belichick had that success, that faith in Brady early on in his career, and he thrived to it. So if that had happened, let's say Belichick had went ahead and, like early on before they won the Super Bowl, just was out of there and somebody else comes in, they may not look like Brady and be like, oh, Brady's our guy. They may not have that confidence in him. So your quarterback, your offensive coordinator, your coach, they're all together. They're in this here. You can get away with the offensive coordinator mixing it up, but the coach and quarterback, those guys have to be as a brotherhood, unlike no other. So with Daniels and Tua, to answer your question, it's not. They're both on the hot seat here. If the Miami Dolphins have an abysmal year, they're probably both gone. Now, obviously, it'll be the coach first who'll be gone, and the new coach coming in is not going to have that commitment to Tua that Daniels has. So they're both in the hot seat here. It's time for the Miami Dolphins to, much like Jacksonville, figure it out.
So it's funny, right? Because you and I very rarely agree. We don't read each other's notes and stuff. So people that normally watch this show, which thank you for watching, by the way, normally see us going at it a little bit more. But I hate the fact that we've agreed so much.
Annoying.
It is, because I literally have the first thing on my notes is that I'm firm on this. It's both. They're attached at the hip. That's literally what I have as far as, and then I kind of go from there. And so I will add this, though. It's playoffs or nothing. In other words, I don't care about the cap. You can't use that as an excuse. You have enough talent, dollars and cents spent, which is why you're tight in the cap to begin with, where you're supposed to create a team that goes into the playoffs. And so ultimately, they're attached at the hip. But if they don't make the playoffs, guess what? He's gone this year.
Yes.
And that's, to your point, both quarterback, coach, quarterback, however you want to do it, because even if McDaniels benches Tua, right? Let's say 7 weeks in he benches him, which I doubt, but let's say he does. He's still out, and vice versa. So you got to make the playoffs or you're out, my man. Let's move on to the Bucs, Johnny Cinco, where the Tampa Bay Bucs, the knock on the Bucs has been always that the coach, Bowles, needs to go. Todd Bowles needs to go. So if the Bucs miss the playoffs, say it isn't so, if they miss the playoffs, is Bowles done in Tampa?
I think without question.
He hasn't done enough?
I think without question, Bowles is done. I mean, if you just look at the Tampa Bay's history, I mean, Tony Dungy did more, and he was gone. Tony Dungy was a better coach, did more with the team, and still they went ahead and said, we have a good team. We're just, unfortunately, it just didn't work out. I still think they would have won the next year with Tony Dungy. Maybe not because of the Oakland Raiders at the time. It was the team they faced, and of course the coach that they went and picked up was their former coach, so he knew all the players. So it was a perfect storm for Tampa to win that championship, so maybe it was worth it. Because this is not a knock on Tony Dungy, one of my favorite coaches, a great coach. But just because you're a good coach, and Bowles is a really good coach, you have your chances. You need to – Bowles has to not just get into the playoffs, not just win a game. Honestly, I think Tampa this year, he has to get into the NFC Championship. If he doesn't get to the NFC Championship, then I think it's time to move on from Bowles. There are plenty of other coaches that have won Super Bowls that will be available, hint, hint, McCarthy, There's coaches who are looking, who are chomping at the bit, waiting to go ahead and take over a team like Tampa Bay.
Wow.
So Bowles, you have the personnel. Yes, we alluded to a couple different pieces you need to change. Go and pick up, cut, whatever. That's our advice. You should take it. But at the end of the day, Tampa, Bowles, you need to do better this year. I've talked about Jacksonville. You shouldn't just accept just being in the middle of the pack. You shouldn't accept with 8-game season. You shouldn't accept like, oh, I won 8 games. No, you should accept it. Tampa especially. If I'm saying that for Jacksonville, Tampa, a Super Bowl winning franchise, a team who has pieces, who has a really good team here, probably right now the best team in Florida. No, I'm not accepting missing the playoffs. You missed the playoffs. Get the heck out of here. But you can't just make the playoffs. You actually have to compete. Don't just win one game like you did 2 years ago against the Eagles. Actually get in there, compete, make the NFC Championship, and not further. To really show that, no, this guy has the chops. Let's keep it going.
I mean, at the end of the day, I love the Tony Dungy reference because it really shows that at the end of the day, you could be a great coach, you could win games, but it's all about the playoffs. And it's all about how you win in the playoffs. Right? And that's really what it comes out to. And so every single year, the last 3 years, he's gotten better by one game. And the problem with Bowles is that he's his own worst enemy. I'm going to tell you why. This last season, in the preseason, and when he's talking to his team, what is he talking about? Super Bowl. He literally said Super Bowl like 5 different times in his speech. And so, and I understand why, because he sees the talent, he sees Baker Mayfield, he sees what they're building. And so you create that expectation for your team. So when you do that, coach, you put your own self in the hot seat. And I respect you for that. Because
you think he's supposed to say, hey guys, win 8 games?
Yeah, but as you know, not to your point, not everybody goes into their season in the off season, preseason, and then starts talking about how they're going to win. They're here for the Super Bowl and nothing else. And that's something that Bowles has never done in the previous years for that matter. So for him to do that, you set the expectation, you raise the bar for yourself. So absolutely, wholeheartedly, you nailed it on the head. If you do not win in the playoffs this season, it is a failure and you do need to leave. And unfortunately, it's unfortunate, but here's the deal. When the GM does what they need to do, when the players play to their expectations, when all those things are formulating properly, the only anomaly, the only thing that's wrong is what?
Coach.
The coach. And so, to your point, I'm 100%. He needs to go. And I'll even go one step further. I don't want to see this season for the Bucs. They start 0-2, 0-3. If you do that stuff early, you got to go. I'm sorry. I'm not going to wait around. You're 0-4. Get out. It's time to move on. And all respect, coach. All respect. I'm a diehard fan. If you can't talk about Super Bowl, you can't talk about playoffs, bringing talent back, signing Garrett or Bosa, like you said, you can't talk about all that and then not show up.
Well, I think when you saw the mistake that the Jets did and they went ahead and fired Saleh, like way too soon. I get it. 4 games in the season, they wouldn't like where they were, and they went and fired. What happened? That didn't help them. So listen. We're both in agreement. To you don't make the playoffs, you're out. But I think for you, just kind of like no, mid-season, if it's not working out,
I demand better. 449 all-time record, 250. To your point, talking about the playoff record, you have unless injuries happen, like God forbid, Baker Mayfield gets hurt week 2. This is something totally different. That's not what I'm saying. But if everyone is healthy, Johnny, Godwin is playing, they re-signed Levante David, all that good stuff. I'm telling you right now, you're 0-3 with this team. You got to go. You got to go.
I understand. I disagree because this isn't a knock on the conference or the division, but the NFC South, you don't need to win, 14, 15 games to win it traditionally in the last few years. So at the end of the day, you can go ahead and be 0-3. Not that you want to be. Nobody wants to be 0-3. But you can be 0-3 and still win this division. So, no, at the end of the day, I don't care what your regular season record is. Get into the playoffs and do damage in the playoffs. Tampa Bay Buccaneers won the Super Bowl as a wild card. Nobody gave a damn about their regular season record when they came up in the playoffs and whipped the butt of Aaron Rodgers.
Because we had the top 3 defense and we had that Brady guy.
Yeah, that one Brady guy. At the end of the day, it is what it is. But let's imagine we have an abysmal season here in Tampa Bay, and it doesn't work out. You missed the playoffs, Chris. Okay, we're talking about Bowles.
Yeah, he's gone.
What about Baker? Now, I am not saying if they have an abysmal season, they're going to go ahead and cut Baker. That's ridiculous. But if you have a terrible season, Baker Mayfield, and it doesn't work out, is Tampa looking to possibly draft your replacement?
No. No. And a wholehearted no. And for two reasons. Number one, Jason Light, I hope he knows if he's listening right now to the podcast, you've been there, done that with Trask. Brady was the quarterback, and you drafted a quarterback. You've been there, done that. You could have added somebody to help instead of drafting Trask, right?
They still won a Super Bowl,
right?
So they did okay.
No. That was after they brought in Trask for the thing. So
they should have won the next year, but the defense decided they don't need to cover Cooper Kupp in the last last couple seconds. They should have went back to back.
I was at the game. I know. And so, no, they shouldn't. In fact, this year, what I expect them to do, Johnny, is I expect them to sign him for another year. So he gets another 3 years from now. He's got 2 years left on his deal. They should re-sign him for 3 years because the one knock that Mayfield had, if you look at his stats and everything, and if you look at last year's episode that we recorded here at Florida Man Sports, I said, can he do it back-to-back? And he did. He delivered. The interceptions are a concern. He's a gunslinger. He reminds me a lot of Brett Favre, where you put up with the interceptions because of how dynamic he is. But no, he has proven with the Bucs over the last couple of years that if the team struggles, yeah, it may be some of the interceptions, but it's not all on him. He's a winner. He knows how to win, and he's won in the playoffs for that as well. So, no, it's not going to be Baker Mayfield. I don't want to hear that as an argument, is my point. If it's anything, it's going to be the coach.
Okay. I mean, I think that if Baker has an abysmal season, he's still under contract.
What's an abysmal season for you, though? What's an abysmal season?
3,000
yards, 3,500 yards. Who would have won? What's an abysmal?
Well,
the guy has set the bar here, bro.
Ideally, if you miss the playoffs, I would imagine it's an abysmal season to where forget the yardage because, like you said, he's a gunslinger. Mm-hmm. But if your interceptions to touchdowns is relatively close,
Jameis Winston,
if it's something like exactly. So if you have a situation like that, then it's like, all right, it's not a bad idea. I'm not mad at Jason Light to go ahead and picking up Trask. Brady was 42 years old or whatever the time. Of course, you have to kind of look and see. I mean, I wasn't crazy about that pick. When I saw they drafted him, like that guy.
They could have drafted him later on. I thought they could have drafted him later on.
I mean, I don't know. You're
if that's what you're aiming for,
up.
if you're aiming for him, you could have gotten him later on.
I mean, at the end of the day, that's fine. It's perfectly fine that they went and picked him up. It wasn't the right pick, but hey, they took a shot. It's fine. They still competed. They still really should have went back-to-back because that second-year team, what Tampa, I think it was better than the first-year team, but it just ended up being just ridiculousness at the end. They can't guard Cooper Kupp, but it is what it is there. But well, they
won the Super Bowl. Sorry, the Florida Man Sports. Sorry, go ahead.
We appreciate you guys listening and watching. If you like to any feedback, you want to go ahead and let us know. Of course, you can comment on our videos. We also have our email at flmansports@gmail.com. Feel free to let us know what you guys think and what you guys want to hear moving forward, guys. Well, we appreciate you guys. Any final words, Chris?
Go Bucs. Hold on. Go Jacksonville. Go Miami. Go UCF. Go Florida State. Go Miami. Let's go.
I like that you changed the tone at the end because you were going very fluent early on there.
We're going to get to college football. Let's go.
Thanks, guys, for listening. Till next week.